Hello, I'm Nan Simonson, and I am the author of Aging Powerfully. And my mantra is as we live and as we age, which is part of living, we have choices as to how we're going to adapt and adopt to changes in our lives. And we can choose to age and live with power, taking power steps to get us through some of the hard things, making a decision that what is easy isn't necessarily what's best for us, and what's hard may be exactly what we need. Today's subject of this presentation is living unafraid. I actually have a chapter on that in my book, and I'll remind you that, or tell you, that the word powerfully is an acronym in this book for 10 words that will help us to age with power based on the precepts of lifestyle as medicine. There is an organization, the College of Lifestyle Medicine, that is certifying physicians to look at health and well-being not as something they were trained to do pills and procedures to mitigate, but as something that they could and should be trained to evaluate based on what lifestyle modifications can be made to bring about health, because 80% of the chronic diseases in our country, America, are lifestyle related and not something we have to live with. Some of them were never seen in the early part of the 1900s, and then they became chronic by the end of the 1900s, and now we're inundated with a sick culture that doesn't have to be. Well, the precepts of lifestyle medicine are first outlined under the word power, but fully, the last part of the word, is 5 other modalities that will make a difference in how we go through our days and how that affects our body and how that affects our mind. And one of those chapters, the one that's the U under fully, is the power of living unafraid. Living unafraid. Something to read you. Of all the liars in the world, sometimes the worst are our own fears. That's from Rudyard Kipling. Another, one of the greatest discoveries a man makes, one of the great surprises, is to find he can do what he was afraid he couldn't do. And that is Paranama Yoga Nana. And in other words, it's a Ayurvedic philosophy. And I'll read you the first sentence of my book, and it may not relate to you because I'm older than you may be. Perhaps I'm not. But when I wrote my book a year and a half ago, 2 years ago when I began it, as we age, especially in our later years, it becomes all too easy to look at what we're leaving behind and fear what we're going into. At 70, I'm now 71, I'm solidly in my later years and have begun to entertain thoughts about these last few years. It was with this realization that I stomped my foot and said, no way, I have at least 20 to 30 years ahead and a purposeful mission with which to fill those years. Will I live another 20 or 30 years? I don't know. Will I make a huge difference with my purpose and my mission? I don't know. The point was that I had an option. I could have lived in fear of what was being left behind, what was ahead, and be reduced to simply I'll say fighting what felt inevitable instead of taking control and deciding that I was going to live my life on purpose, with power, taking anyone who wanted to go with me along with me. I had been through some fearful times, and coming out of them made me that much stronger. And so in this book, I wrote some recommendations for getting through fear. But instead of reading that, because some of you have read my book, I'm going to um, look at some of the, I'll call it philosophy, the recommendations of a man whose work I just became familiar with. And his name is Adam Hamilton. He's a pastor, and he gave an opening, or yes, presented an opening prayer, well, many years ago now, at the inauguration of Barack Obama. And he wrote a book, Unafraid. And I'm going to outline some of the recommendations, some of the thoughts, some of the precepts that he introduced in that book. And you can find him online. You can find his book. He is a Christian minister. He is a scholar. He's a psychologist. And he has a lot to say as it relates, and realistically, regardless of what our spiritual orientation is, that is logical and I think probably very helpful at this time. This is February 29th, and our world has been, I'll say, shaken by a reality of something that I think a lot of people didn't really expect would happen, and that is Russia's incursion into the Ukraine. And it's shaken some people up. I do group meetings with patients and with clients, and I had a meeting yesterday during which, and it wasn't just this situation, but it's a combination of things. We're possibly coming out of a lot of the restrictions of COVID-19 and its variants. And we've just been through a lot. And I think a lot of people have a lot of fear about where we are, where we're going, where they fit in. There have been so many changes in these last 2 years. And yesterday during one of the group meetings that I did, somebody shared how her fears, how the situations around her had affected her to the degree that she somewhat shut down. She was affected with a deep sadness. A lot of emotion was being expressed. She felt that she couldn't really function the way she wanted to. And I realized that everybody is thinking of what is happening in our world and having and dealing with their own interpretation and their own feelings of fear, anxiety, possibly depression, or ambivalence in some cases. But I thought I could offer something. It will be relatively short, and if I can, make a difference in this way. And so I'm just going to go through bullet points of thought. For example, get yourself out of yourself. There are so many people affected by everything that goes on around us, and we all have our own, I'll say, translation, interpretation, expectations, fears, in any number of ways we express those. If we can get ourselves out of ourselves, and it sounds like I'm being religious here, but I'm not. I'm going to state a basic tenet of the way I believe, and that is that there is a power greater than ours that has a lot more control over what we and others do, and tap into it and trust it. If any of you have ever been in 12-step programs, they talk about our higher power. Higher power can turn some people sideways if that's, I mean, physically, literally, I'm not hearing you, if that's not what they accept. But higher power can simply be the universe. You ask yourself, could I have made all of this? Could anything, anybody, and we have the most brilliant people alive now in the United States and around the world. Could any of those people have created a human body, our world, plants, the stars, the solar system? No. There is some higher power. And if we can get out of ourselves and allow ourselves to trust that in one way or another, it will work out, and take some of that energy out of us and give it away. There's a song, oh, who sings it? Oh, I can't remember. But, and again, this sounds religious. I'm just using an example. And the song is, Jesus, take the wheel. I can't do this anymore. And that's kind of what I'm talking about. That's a start. That sounds like we have to be at the end of our rope, but sometimes it's just almost a metaphoric kind of a letting go. Take the wheel. I can't do this. That can take a lot of the pressure of what we think we need to do in times where we feel out of control. A Bible verse, one that Adam Hamilton spoke of. Where there is hate, let me sow love. In other words, rather than jumping in and jumping on a roller coaster of strong emotion with more strong emotion, let me throw in there the possibility that through love, through believing in best outcomes, through staying a course and being a beacon to others of, I'm going to say positivity, but not Pollyanna, we can make a difference to those around us. Fear is normal, but you're not meant to be paralyzed by it. In other words, there's nothing wrong with, at any time in our lives, under any circumstances, feeling fear, feeling afraid of what we can see and what we can't see, what we believe is real and what we are imagining. That's fine, but to be paralyzed by it is not something that we have to experience. We can overcome that and we can get through that. Our fears are also different at different ages. When we're in our younger years and we're raising our family and we're becoming something in the world or somebody, and we are creating our, I'll say, perceived long-term success, uh, the paradigms under which we're going to live in terms of our presence in the world. There are fears involved with that. As we get older, there are fears involved with security, with physical capability, with mental acuity. Um, when we're very young, and gosh, oh my goodness, the kids in school right now, community is so important to us all, but especially to kids. And they've had exposure retraction. They're going through a really hard time. Kids in elementary, especially kids in middle school and high school. So at every different age, we have other fears that we can't even, in many cases, express. But it's not something that we have to be paralyzed by, because first, we realize that most things in life that are worthwhile come along with a degree of risk. So moving forward, finding new ways of adopting and adapting and simply accepting can empower us to know that we can be pliable enough and capable enough to get through just about anything. And being unafraid doesn't mean being without fear. It means pressing through that fear, feeling the fear, and doing what we need to do anyway. Pressing through the fear, not pretending it's not there, being aware, acknowledging. Fear sometimes can be FEAR, all capitalized, false evidence appearing real. Sometimes what we fear is not a reality. Sometimes it's an extension of our apprehension and not at all what may happen. Now again, when we're in a world that has suddenly kind of exploded and there's a lot not understood about where it's going to go, it can be very unsettling. And yet I'm praying that we all, and especially those who have control in this situation a lot more than we do, are going to let the failures of the past be the best teachers of now. But even in our own little worlds, be willing to accept the failures as our best teachers. Looking back at anything that may not have gone well, that may have been, I'll call it world-shattering when it occurred, be it the loss of another or be it our own miscalculations. There were lessons there that left us better. So nothing is so bad that it should be feared as if it will be the end of us. That is so seldom the case. What can help? Meditation, mindfulness, journaling are all helpful. Journaling gets it out. It creates a record. It allows us to measure our progress. It allows us to be still long enough to understand what's percolating in our mind that makes us anxious, and put it down and look at it and just get it down on paper. Whether we journal at night, whether we journal first thing in the morning, or just stop sometime during the day, take some deep breaths, do some mindful things so that we can quiet the buzz in our mind, and then maybe put some things down on paper, even if it's just chicken scratch for your eyes only, can be very, very helpful. We have an area of the brain called the amygdala. The amygdala is an ancient part of our brain. It is our alarm system. The amygdala is where we feel fear, where we get adrenal rushes, I'll call it system alerts that go down to the adrenals that give us the adrenal rush. But it's not always accurate. The amygdala is like that smoke alarm sometimes that goes off and had misread cues. It was just something coming out of a pot of steaming water and the alarm goes off. It can misfire and it can create anxiety and it can create panic. Attack anxiety with action. Anxiety and fear is meant to elicit a response. It's meant to. Our body is ready for action, but be in control of that response. Anxiety is reduced by deliberate action, and both anxiety as well as action take the same amount of energy. So when we're feeling that anxiety, if we take action, that action is no more difficult than living with the anxiety, but it takes us away from it. Lean into the fear and lean into fear with action. I'll talk more about that in just a minute. I'll leave that alone for now. There's a anagram, FOMO, and there must be, I think there's a different word for that as well when it's used as a new descriptive, but I don't know what that is. Stands for, and apparently it's rather hot in social media right now, and it's rather hot among young people. They know what it means, FOMO, fear of missing out. Unfortunately, social media hits us in small bits of quite often untruths, in visuals of what look like a complete picture, but is just the tail end or the beginning of, or some minuscule representation of what's real. And it's also giving us that fear of missing out when we scroll through social media and everybody looks like they're either better off than us, happier than us, better looking than us, further along in life than us, or more together. And it's so easy for people to, I'll call it a gaslight, to gaslight us, to make us think, maybe not even meaning to, but to allow us to think that we're missing out, or that things are happening and we're missing out on the truth of what that really is. Now, that's not really the way FOMO is usually used. It's usually used in the context of, look how great this is. Boy, you might be missing out. Look who I'm with. Sorry, you're not there too. Look at who we know. Look at what we've been doing. Boy, you're missing out. So it has a number of contexts, but it's just as shrouded in misrepresentation, regardless of how you look at it. And be aware of that. Don't be taken by what we think we're missing out on, what we fear is going on that we aren't a part of, because quite often it's either not true or it was never, seldom as good as it looked like it was. Andrew Huberman, Dr. Huberman, is a neurobiologist and teaches, he's a neuroscientist and teaches neurobiology and ophthalmology, which is interesting. The point of the eyes being all part of that is that the eyes are part of the brain. They're just a part of the brain that's outside of the skull, and they give information to the brain. When he refers to fear, or I'll say lack of motivation or anxiety, and how action is what can get us out of all of that, he describes it this way: action trumps motivation every time. In other words, we have a feeling, we have a almost a physical sensation sometimes when things are getting to us. Action trumps motivation. We may not feel like doing a thing, but do it anyway, because it will always lead to a um, a way of getting through what we're going through in a positive way rather than a destructive and physically debilitating way. What are some of the things that we can do in terms of action trumps motivation? Sometimes it's just getting outside, going and sitting in a garden, getting our face in the sun for a little while in the morning or the later afternoon, walking in a park, um, going around the block, uh, movement, what we see in front of us, sitting down and meditating, sitting down and journaling, action of some kind, getting on the phone and calling somebody, maybe assuming that somebody else is lonely around us, get out of ourself enough to just call someone and say, hey, I was thinking about you. How'd the da-da-da go last week? Everybody wants to know that people have paid enough attention to their life, that they are paying attention to their actions, and to remember that makes you a hero in that moment because you've just elevated somebody. In other words, get out of ourselves. Choose to live with hope instead of fear, and that is a choice. There are people who find negative in everything. There are people who are angry at little things that happen that are maybe an annoyance, but could be viewed very, very different. I use this example, and it's the dumbest example, but it actually, it delighted me when this happened, for two reasons. I was getting ready for lunch. I split open an avocado. I took my knife. I stabbed it looks like I'm cutting my hand, but here's the avocado. I tap the seed with the knife, and it usually inserts itself and allows me to take the seed out. Well, this seed went out and then simply slipped off my knife. I had just done the kitchen floor, the sweeping of it, the mopping of it, I'll call it buffing after the mopping because it's kind of wet, you get the water off, so it's several steps. It took time. Anyway, this avocado seed, obviously I've got a tilted floor, rolled 15 feet to the back wall of my kitchen, leaving avocado crap all the way. I could have been furious. I could have been depressed and felt sorry for myself. And this is why I say for two reasons. For one, I thought it was hilarious that an avocado would just keep rolling. They're not supposed to do that, but I happened to get this perfectly round avocado pit, a very juicy one, to leave its trail. But the second thing that delighted me was that I found it funny, because I could have been in this hissy situation. Oh gosh, and that would have taken so much energy. Instead, I watched it go, laughed my head off, cleaned up, big deal, and made the sandwich that I started to make. Interesting kind of minor example, but that's what I'm talking about. Choose how you're going to respond to everything around us, and we do have an option. Live with hope instead of fear. Choose to live with hope instead of fear. Again, it takes just as much energy to live with hope. Face fears with a bias of hope. Practice this and it will become your default. Embrace gratitude for all that's around us. It's so easy to look at what isn't, and if we put energy every day, start of the day, end of the day, every time we take a breath, thank you, universe, for being remarkable. I know this is going on and this is going on, and I feel so badly for these people. But right now, I can affect people by being positive, by being a beacon of hope and belief and love. And I think I'll do my job that way rather than sort of sucking the energy out of a room with that power that fear and anxiety have. Developing the capacity for abiding trust is very well worth doing. What is abiding trust? Trust that it will all work out in the end, and also that there's a power greater than ourselves having our back. Very powerful. Faith is using your imagination for believing in those things that may not be true. Isn't that great? Faith is using your imagination for believing in things that may not be true. Practice trust until you feel it. Do you see a general theme here? So much of what we can be ensconced by, shrouded by, in terms of emotion, regardless of whether or not it's justified. And in some cases, it's very justified. But being shrouded and living under a gray cloud isn't necessarily going to make any difference, and we have the option to do it very differently, to still be the sunshine. I did a talk yesterday, a book signing actually, and I brought my sunflowers. Oh, I should have had them out here on the table. Big, gorgeous sunflowers in a vase. And I brought those and explained that they're a bit of a metaphor for how we can approach the world. Because the sunflowers in any amount of light, and they're not called sunflowers because they look like the sun. They're called sunflowers because they follow the sun. They will find the light and grow. And although they're not the prettiest flowers, and although they're not the ones that you're necessarily going to throw in a vase with a lot of others, they're, as I say in my book, a bit of a brute. They're the ones that represent toughness, power. They'll grow just about anywhere. They'll hang tough when the weather is rotten, and they'll follow the sun. And to close up, well, let me remind you of what I just said. Trust until you feel it. And on a practical level, if your fear is debilitating, take some time to understand what it is you're really afraid of, and maybe even do some research around that to tease out what the possibilities in all ways are. And if worst case scenario happens, tease out what solutions are. It can leave you feeling much more in control. Release fears and care, as I said several times, to something or someone greater than yourself. Because we have a limited amount of control over the things that are happening in and around us. And I'll end with a reminder of something that Viktor Frankl came to a conclusion about. Viktor Frankl was a psychiatrist, neurologist, philosopher, author, Holocaust survivor, an Austrian Jew. He wrote Man's Search of Meaning, and number one in terms of what kept people in the concentration camps alive, the number one determinant and factor was their sense of purpose, their why they needed to stay alive. He decided, I will stay alive because I have to make sure others know about this and that it never happens again. Well, Okay, why our sense of meaning? Know yours, know who you are, get out of yourself, understand there's a greater power, but then use all of your power to be the best you can be. Live, age, express yourself with power. Action trumps motivation, and you'll be somebody that others will be inspired by, and you can make a big difference in the world with an attitude like that. I hope you got something out of this. I hope I was helpful. And I want to thank you for joining me. I want to remind you that Aging Powerfully is available on Amazon, that I have a YouTube channel, Nan Simonson, a space between the first and the last name, YouTube Nan Simonson, and my Facebook, Aging Powerfully with Nan group. And I invite you to subscribe to all of that and help us get the word out. Have a great day, because I know I'm going to. And if you heard this, I very much appreciate that you took the time. Bye-bye.